looking for approval of tonight's agenda.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to ask that the agenda be amended to remove the report, the bylaws, under the bylaws 1734 for Colwood Land Use Bylaw 151, amendment number 164 for 22330 and 22344B Souk Road, because there was an extensive public hearing on Tuesday, December 4th, with a number of presentations by members of the community, both for and against, and there is no written report of that public hearing available for members of the public to make representation if they have been perceived incorrectly, or something that they felt was critical has not been included in the report. By having a verbal report, they are not able to correct that. So I'm asking that that bylaw be removed from this agenda, and I would submit that we are perfectly able to host a special meeting of council once that written report is available.
All right, thank you. So does that need to be a motion, or how does that work, looking towards staff, to have that removed off the amendment? Okay.
So I so move that bylaw 1734 not be presented this evening.
Okay. Do I have a seconder? Seeing none, that will...
Okay, I would just like to make one last point. I accept that this body has not agreed with my evaluation, but I just would like to say that without a written report of the public hearing, the members of the public who presented at that public hearing are neither able to confirm or deny whether their comments were taken into consideration, and 2 members of this council were not present.
Okay, thank you. We will we'll be speaking to that at when it comes on the agenda as well, so that can get addressed. Then, so I'm still looking for approval of the agenda. So moved. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Public participation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Karen Lines, and I live at 3148 Linlark Place. I'm speaking this evening regarding the bylaw 1734. You're going to be asked tonight to consider approving a rezoning application for a very critical part of Colwood. It's an area that is currently a residential neighborhood. It's in one of the last green space that connects Triangular Mountain to the Colwood Creek. And you've heard this council make up now, and previous councils before have heard the presentations from the residents of Linlark, Jadel, and Karan and Kildu. The streets between Veterans Memorial and Metchosin Road that we believe will be affected by the impact of the density that's being proposed by this development. Now, the single residential neighborhood is an established neighborhood from the late 60s, 69, roundabout there, maybe even a little earlier. And it's been a very comfortable, very nice neighborhood to live in, to come home to. The presentations that have been made by the developers are very extensive, but they've asked all along for the maximum amount that they can put on that property. And the residents have brought forward a fair amount of information saying that we're concerned about egressing and ingressing off of...
Sorry, I may interrupt you just for a moment.
Yes.
So
Excuse me, my apologies, Mr. Mayor, but we've had the public hearing on this development, and I'm not quite sure we're delving into territory that we should be delving into.
Okay. That's so.
Okay, I think I understand.
Yeah, just for clarification, once public hearing closes, the council cannot accept any new information or any information regarding this. So.
Okay, well, then I guess what I would like to finish then is that you are being asked to consider a very important project, and the residents have asked for reduced density, and we don't believe that we've been heard on that issue. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you really do consider that this is another gateway to Colwood, and it needs to be considered highly what it looks like. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, neighbors. I'm Chris Wright. I live on Marianne Crescent, and I will be speaking to agenda item 6.1.1, and I'll do my best to do that because there are no attachments to the agenda available to the public this evening, so I'm going on your 3 pages. So this agenda item is an RCMP report that's provided quarterly, and if memory serves me right, about 2 years ago, this is the sort of thing that would have been presented to the Protective Services Committee. And when the previous council decided to get rid of committees, that responsibility was supposed to go to the Committee of the Whole, at which members of the public, like myself, could express their concerns or ask questions of people making presentations. Because this agenda item is at council, I don't have that opportunity, and I think that that's really disappointing. I think it's important to give members of the public the opportunity to be involved if they wish to. However, since I do have a few moments available to me to speak, I'm going to ask my questions now and hope that the inspector has an excellent memory and can answer them during his presentation. So on page 1 of his report, and I'm going by memory, so I might not get the pages exactly right, mention is made of an APP priority, and I don't really know exactly who sets that or where it's set or whether that's done by members of different communities, whether councillors get together, whether there's some kind of overarching public body that sets the priorities for the Colwood Police Force. Perhaps the inspector could speak to that. On page 2, there's made mention of something called a street check. I have no idea what that means. Perhaps the inspector could elaborate on that. On page 4, there's a table that shows the different files that the RCMP has created over the last quarter. And 2 of the items are, one is percent calls for service, of which Colwood is comprised of about 18%. Street checks, which I still don't know what they are, Colwood has had 10% of the number done in the West Shore. And there's a statement that the Colwood population represents 23% of the West Shore. So I would like the inspector to clarify, should we be happy with these numbers? Are they better to have numbers that are lower than the percent of population, i.e. Colwood's a safe place to be? Or should we be disappointed in that we're not receiving the level of service that we're actually paying for? So I don't really know how to interpret that. Perhaps the inspector could elaborate. Unless people think I'm grumpy, if you look at page 16, on the very bottom, there's a photograph that shows some people out in canoes in the ocean. I thought that was wonderful. I can relate to that one wholeheartedly. In general, I have 3 questions. I understand that members of the RCMP are usually trained in more than one discipline. So for example, an officer might be an expert in day-to-day traffic enforcement, but also have skills for something like counterterrorism activities that Ottawa might call them from time to time to provide service to our country for. And I also understand that there's some cost neutrality with that, in that when an officer is outside the West Shore area, they're paid by the federal government to do things for the federal government. But I wonder if the inspector could comment as to who backfills for the officers that are not in Colwood when that's happening. I understand, too, that during the budget process last year, the RCMP increased the number of FTEs that Colwood's providing by adding a part-time watch clerk position. And I think I commented on this during the budget process that I didn't understand the rationale for why that was required. So now that about a year's gone by since then, it would be nice to know how many overtime dollars we've actually saved by having that position brought in. And then finally, on page 3 are some statistics for files that were opened in the city of Colwood specifically. And if I could bring your attention to the line that reads impaired op move, which I think means impaired operation of a motor vehicle. And our current year to date is 81, and that's in 9 months. So if we prorate that, that would be 108 per year. And I thought, well, is that significant, yes or no? So there's about 18,000 people who live in Colwood, and let's say about 2/3 of them have a driver's license. I'm just guessing, I have no idea. So that would mean that about 1 in 120 drivers in Colwood is charged or has an interaction with an RCMP officer regarding impaired driving. And that number really kind of shocked me a lot. I wonder if the inspectors could comment and tell me whether I've done my math correctly. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Is there anybody else for public? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if you could please excuse me from this meeting as I have a conflict of interest in this matter.
Okay.
I'm Tim Day, 3546 Charnley Place. Our rock walls were damaged and our hedge was damaged because of this tree that was taken down without notice, even though it was protected and permitted. No notice was given to us, and it was killed. This is a giant sequoia, a very significant tree. So I just want everyone to see how big of a tree that the city of Colwood can kill without even talking to the owner of the tree. I find it shameful, and I'll leave it at that. I'm deeply offended by the news that's been posted on the website about our situation. I feel that it's slanderous and is full of misinformation and false statements. I would like to address the slander, the false statements. The trees that fell over after the snowfall in December 2016 were not ours. Were not planted by us and were not associated with our highway use permit. The trees that everyone wants to refer to as our trees have nothing to do with us, and when they fell over, they were cleaned up for $450 on January 16th, 2017. So the trees are not part of this story at all. The trees that are part of this story was the part of the clear cut of the entire boulevard. Our boulevard is 6,500 square feet in front of our house. It was clear cut of every evergreen tree without notice to the residents of Charnley Place, with the exception of one resident. I feel this is not fair. It's a destruction of green space, and that green space was large enough that it provided habitat for the animals. It is now barren, and nothing will grow there because it is so hot. It is so hot that it's affected our neighborhood. It's a south-facing bowl devoid of all living things. There were some smaller plants there, but they've been parched. There was no damage to the house at 3550 Charnley Place. There has been no repair to the house at 3550 Charnley Place. So the assertion that our trees caused damage to a neighbor's house is false and inaccurate. It plays to my character, and I feel slandered when you say that my tree fell on the neighbor's house. It was not my tree, and no damage was done. The city has coerced and threatened us to sign an encroachment agreement to deny our rights of our highway use permit. Our highway use permit was approved in 2003 with an inspection by the municipal engineer. Our highway use permit is in force as long as we maintain our boulevard improvements to the satisfaction of the municipal engineer. So saying that a highway use permit is a temporary permit is false. It is good for as long as you maintain your highway use permitted area, as we have done. On March 24th, 2017, our sequoia tree was killed and 4 of our golden leilani were killed. All were protected and permitted. They were killed without our notice. Not only did we not receive notice, we received a false report from the staff on site who said that our sequoia tree would not be touched, and then ordered the crew to kill it as quickly as they could. I was able to stop the killing of our sequoia tree by running underneath it where the branches were falling, and the other crew yelled at the guy till he finally stopped dropping branches on me. We were told then, I was told then by staff and the person that was heading the tree company, no further damage would happen to our tree. It was pretty ugly, but it would have survived probably. Now, Cynthia had to take my mom to a doctor's appointment, and since we were assured that our tree would not be touched, I went back into the house. It was a very traumatizing experience, and we've been victimized since that day. When I came out at the end of the day to find that our giant sequoia had been killed and cut into rounds for our neighbor to use as firewood, and also 4 golden leilani that were planted to stabilize my boulevard improvements, as was the sequoia, were killed. There is no rationale for the clear cutting of a large green space by the city, and no arborist at any time was ever involved. No arborist has ever been to our site. I've filed a Freedom of Information request, and the information I have is through that. The city has not supplied me with the engineering report done on May 12th, 2017. That engineering report, I don't know if the new council has seen it or not, but no safety concerns are noted. I repeatedly asked the city, what is the safety concern? No safety concerns were stated, but we were continued to be coerced and threatened if we did not sign this agreement to give up our rights of highway use permit and to hold the city accountable for the damage they've done, that our rock wall would be torn down. We had no idea what the city was going to do this past week because I was told there is no paperwork. So I don't understand how this city can operate. There is no accountability to the public, and our valid highway use permit was violated. Violated on March 24th and violated this past week. I made a presentation at public participation on June 12th and June 26th, 2017. I did not threaten legal action at either presentation. Yet, the Colwood News article says they had to act because I threatened legal action, but through a Freedom of Information request, I found out the city had contacted the solicitors on April 28th, 2017, to find a strategy to deal with the killing of our trees. Obviously, the strategy was to coerce us into signing an agreement where we would have no rights to the boulevard. Not only no rights to the boulevard, but what happened this past week, where Cynthia was arrested, would be allowed under this encroachment agreement that we were being forced to sign. We were given a no-win situation, and no one in Colwood has had their highway use permitted, violated, and all of it done in camera. I see it mentioned that the previous council supported this recommendation. Well, I feel, Mr. Mayor, you're only speaking for yourself and Gordon, because there has been no public knowledge of this before the decree that was issued on November 26th. The decree that was issued on November 26th of this year was handed to Cynthia. No one in Colwood is aware of the decree. The video was first shown this past Friday. The minutes of the meeting were first posted today. And now we carry on. We'd like to move on. How can we move on when the city is unable to accept responsibility for their actions? I have offered the city in writing that I would not sue the city for killing our trees. So any argument or implication that we were going to sue the city is false, and I have it in writing. I have everything that I say in writing. I collect facts. I don't make false allegations. I collect facts. If I make accusations, it's based on facts. It may be some people uncomfortable, but it's all based on facts. Facts that are recorded on paper.
Mr. Day, normally we end at 7:20. I'm going to extend it until 7:30 for you, but you're going to need to wrap your remarks up by, you have 6 more minutes.
Oh, that's fine, thank you. An update. Our hedges have been damaged such that our privacy from the cul-de-sac is lost. We no longer have privacy from the cul-de-sac. We have had privacy from that cul-de-sac since 1987, from the day we moved in. The holes that were cut in our hedge were done with the purpose of taking our rocks. Rocks that were never identified as unsafe. The city has never produced anything that says the rocks are unsafe. That's a false allegation, and it's based on whatever. I filed a Freedom of Information request, so I know there is no paperwork to back up that false allegation. But I also know that an engineering inspection of our rock walls was done on May 12th, after our trees were cut, and that engineering inspection would not be released to me by the city. I obtained that report through Freedom of Information. There is no safety concerns mentioned in the report, but somehow we got a letter on May 24th from the city solicitor saying that we had created an unsafe condition. I have tried and tried to get the city to identify what they consider to be unsafe, and they have refused. They've refused to come to the property to identify it. They've refused to put on writing what the problem is, and they have refused to offer me what they want me to do. How can I do that when my choice is 7 times coerced and threatened into an encroachment agreement? No one has encroachment agreement. I think that what's gone on here is unique, probably in the province of municipalities. This is pushing municipal authority beyond its limits. I feel that my wife's arrest pushed the authority of this municipality beyond its limits. We have been given no justification for what they had planned. I will only find out through a Freedom of Information request that there is no plan, but I'm giving you a heads up, so maybe someone wants to write it up. I repeatedly, after our holes were cut in our hedge to destroy our privacy, to take away our rocks, to remove our rocks right next to our yard, they had to take them uphill for convenience. So to get a backhoe to take my rocks, they chopped holes in the hedge so the backhoe would aid them in taking my rocks away. This is unfair. I asked my rocks stay on the property, and my property was right there. The rock wall was taken apart with guys with big bars. So if you're saying a rock wall is unsafe and you need big guys with big bars to displace a rock, I don't know what you're going on. Our rock wall, built at a 2-foot minus, if anyone knows what that is, was repeatedly slammed by the backhoe, and it had no effect on the wall. But it did allow them to get the pry bars in to get more rocks out. So, with the removal of the rocks, my topsoil is now gone. This is the back of my planter. And now the back has been taken off, so the topsoil will carry on downhill and be lost. When they took the rocks away from the back of the hedge, they exposed the topsoil that is supporting the laurel hedge. The laurel hedge, in time, will go down the hill like the topsoil. So this is causing damage. This is not to address safety. I repeatedly asked the city staff not to dump bark mulch on my permitted area. The city responded by dumping a huge amount of bark mulch in our yard. I feel that's truly offensive. That's above and beyond. So what I did is I've taken a highlighter of the statements that are either false or misleading from that news thing is posted on the Colwood website. I'd say it's more than half. More than half of what's on the Colwood website is false or misleading and certainly slanders me and my wife. My wife has acted professionally throughout this entire ordeal. We have been traumatized over and over, and I do not hold the new council accountable for it because they were at their first in-camera meeting. They are new to being councillors, and I feel that they were swayed. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. I feel had they known the information that supported the city's false claim of a safety concern, that they may have voted differently. We have never...
Mr. Day, you have 1 minute left.
Okay, we have never had the opportunity to discuss this in public. There has been no public process. The first thing that's ever been released by the city is the statement of November 26. There has never been an attempt to negotiate with us. The attempt was to use threats and coercion to deny us our rights. So we would certainly like to deal with the city to remedy this action, and I'm willing to participate in that. I put that in writing, and I've sent it to the mayor. I have received no reply, but I would like to back down this process. And it's not over. It is certainly not over. I can imagine that some people would like to see it over, but it's not.
Mr.
Okay.
Day. That's
Thank
your
you.
time. All right, we are out of time, so we're going to move on. Wait, sorry. Yeah, I'll wait for Cynthia to come back. Mayor's message. Just a couple things to announce. Colwood, South Island Prosperity Project, which Colwood is a partner of, has just announced that they are a finalist within the Canadian Smart Cities Challenge, and we could be up for a $10 million award towards a multimodal transportation network that is green and affordable. And truth of the matter is, I'd be very surprised if we don't win that. We seem to be head and shoulders above any of the other applications, so it'll be interesting to see sort of where that goes. In addition to that, however, we need, as a Colwood Council, to appoint a Colwood representative and an alternate to SIP, South Island Prosperity Project. I would like to ask Council support to appoint Councillor Doug Kobayashi as the Council representative, and to appoint myself, Mayor Rob Martin, as the alternate Council member. Would someone please make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Jensen. All those in favor? Or discussion, I guess I should put. Does anybody have any discussion regarding that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Nobody opposed. The only other things to announce is December 15th, there is a Colwood branch drop-off. Santa is actually coming to Colwood, which is exciting. On December 24th, obviously, he's coming, but he's also coming on December 23rd, and he's joining the fire department, which is super nice of him. So he's driving around for the day with the fire department, so that's awesome. And then also New Year's Day 2019, there's a polar bear swim run by Councillor Logan, who's going to be encouraging us all to attend. Yeah. And that is it for messages. Other than this is the last meeting before Christmas, so I believe, correct? Yeah. So I won't say anything else about that, other than it's the last meeting for the year. I am now looking for adoption of the minutes for for the regular meeting of council on November 26th. Thank you. Moved by congratulations. By Councillor Kobayashi. Seconded by Councillor Jensen. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. I need a motion to receive the Committee of the Whole meetings from September 4th and the Special Committee of the Whole meeting October 16th.
Move receipt, Your Worship.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Be patient with me, folks. 6.1, letter for the Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC. The Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC have written to request a council resolution showing that the City of Colwood endorses the $10 a day childcare plan, which they state is making a real difference and would see the provincial government continue to work with communities to implement a quality, affordable childcare system in BC. What's the will of the council? Councillor Baxter?
I'd like to propose that we support affordable child care, but I don't think that the city's in a position to determine whether it should be $10 a day or $5 a day or $20 a day. So I'm proposing that we communicate the following wording. We, the City of Colwood, support any movement towards a low fixed cost for daycare, which allows single parents to find work and support their families. The current situation where daycare costs are often unaffordable for single parents can work as a poverty trap, which many cannot find a way out of.
Okay, So we have that motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder? A second by Councillor Parkinson. Discussion? Councillor Logan, then Councillor Parkinson, and then Councillor Day.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wholeheartedly support the notion of this resolution. As a parent of 3 kids myself, this is the first year that we finally escaped the cost of daycare. And let me tell you, our family has run up debt in order to pay for daycare that we're going to be carrying for a number of years into the future. So I just want to point out that it doesn't only affect single parents, but also parents with two incomes. No matter what your situation is, having even 1 kid in daycare, single parent or 2 parents is a struggle. But I like the notion here, and I like the way where the province is going, and I hope that in the future we will continue to support parents to have the ability to go out and work and support their families, and with providing affordable childcare that will support them.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson?
I guess my only point, somewhat like what Gordy said, is I think the motion, Michael, if I recall it correctly, was specific to single parents, and I don't think it should be limited to single parents. I think, as Gordy so eloquently said, daycare is expensive no matter how many parents you got. So I would perhaps suggest we could remove single out of that motion.
I'm happy with that.
All right. Thank you. That's a friendly amendment, so we won't need to vote on it. I found that out earlier tonight. Councillor Day?
Thank you. There is actually no such thing as a friendly amendment, but I would have supported the amendment that's been made. There is considerable amount of evidence presented with this letter about the benefits to the community, both economically and for a greater involvement of all of your citizens in every aspect, not just work, but in every aspect of municipal life. I certainly do support the $10 a day plan because the real cost to families, whether they're single parents, multiple parents, weird parents, it takes all kinds to fill this world and do all the things that we need to do. And there is a significant amount of money that has been contributed by the provincial government, $1 billion in new provincial funding over 3 years to try to implement this. And it was something that I put in my election platform, that I supported this, that I advocated for it, and I am very hopeful that we can see new daycare spaces facilitated through money from that funding in Colwood. So any statement to help improve the options for childcare for families who need it is worthy. I certainly would have supported the $10 a day because it's a benefit to every taxpayer when every member of the community is pulling together.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 6.2, letter from the town of View Royal to the Minister, is it Trevena? I'm hoping, Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure. The Mayor of View Royal has copied regional mayors on a letter that was written to the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure requesting a meeting with all regional mayors to discuss regional transportation issues and that First Nation representatives in the region be invited to attend. Just as a quick update, I had a meeting with the Minister today, as well as the Premier, and Mayor Screech was there as well, and Mayor Screech told me that meeting has actually already been scheduled, but I don't think that it would be a problem to actually do a letter of endorsement. Councillor Day.
Thank you. There are numerous studies that have already been done. There exists a regional transportation It's called BC Transit. And Greater Victoria has the full ability to move forward. Having another layer of bureaucracy created to manage scarce resources, I think, is going to do very little to help the situation. Transportation planning is important to every region, every municipality within the capital region, and I feel that the efforts should be put towards getting the funding to put buses and bus infrastructure, transit infrastructure in place, not put in creating another layer of bureaucracy to interpret the 7 studies that have already been done. And Colwood wrote a letter to that effect previously.
Great, thank you. Before we move forward, can I have a motion?
I move receipt.
Thank you. Move receipt. Second?
Second.
Second by Councillor Logan. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 6.1.1, Inspector Todd Preston, Officer in Charge, regarding the West Shore RCMP Detachment Quarterly Mayor's Report for the City of Colwood, July to September of 2018.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you very much for having me. So this is my first time in front of you. I thought I'd start by just telling you a little bit about myself so you know who your commander of the detachment is. I've got 21 years service with the RCMP, 41 years old, married with 2 beautiful daughters, Jaden and Julia. One's in university, first year university, and the other one's in grade 10. I joined at age 19. I've got 21 years service. I started in, I was raised in Sherwood Park, Alberta, and I started in a little place called Redwater, a little farming community there. I was in Edmonton Drug Section doing undercover work. Then I was posted to a First Nations Reserve, Northern Alberta, for 2 years, then Alert Bay for 2 years, then Federal Drug Enforcement on Vancouver Island for 3.5 years. I was transferred up to the Yukon, Watson Lake, Yukon, again, First Nations community. From there, I was down in Kimberley, Cranbrook, where I was there for close to 6 years. Came out to West Shore. I got promoted to West Shore Detachment, where I spent 2 years, and then I was in Internal Affairs Professional Standards in Victoria for 2 years as well, and now I'm back before you. Well, thank you. I took over command of West Shore Detachment this August, and so for the first 3-4 months here, it's just been a learning process, trying to learn the efficiencies, inefficiencies of the detachment, and as well as the communities. I did have a leg up, I suppose, in the fact that I had served here previously. So I will endeavor to answer my friends' questions here, and I'm happy to. I'm certainly happy for all the engagement from community members, and I'm certainly happy to have coffee with anybody that has more pointed, specific questions at any time. So I'll first start by talking a few points here. We'll start with the report regarding staffing levels. So staffing levels when I arrived at the detachment were unfortunately, they were down quite a bit. I think we were short 8 members at the time when I arrived here. There's 80 members at the detachment as of recent. Langford's contributed some recent members to the complement. So we have 46 Langford members, 16.65 Colwood members, 10.35 U-Royal members, 6 provincial members, and 1 First Nations policing officer. As of January 1st, I'm pleased to say there'll be no vacancies. We were able to fill all our vacancies. In fact, we'll probably have a surplus. There's no shortage of members that want to come to this detachment. So it's been great, and I think we're going to have some really great new members. I know some of them personally. I think you'll be very happy with them. As far as calls for service, I see that our calls for service in this area is up 9%. The total files are up 12% over the last quarter. Pleased to say that the sexual offenses are down 47%. The break and enters to businesses are down 25%, and the drug trafficking is down 42%. There was a significant increase of assaults, up 50%, though. Theft from autos up 32%, domestic violence 29%, and mental health files up 39%. And those ones, to me, are very concerning. I think in talking with the members here recently, we've seen a real influx of mental health issues. And, that's obviously very sad from a community standpoint, but it's also very time-consuming for the police trying to find resources for these people. Our average wait time at the hospital is approximately 2 hours, so you can appreciate the call volume and the amount of hours that are spent by your police at the hospital. Our street checks are up significantly, 435%. So what we've done is we've made a real conscious effort to get out. And a street check, for those that don't know what that is, it's simply stopping, engaging somebody, asking them what they're doing, how they are, where they're going. And we find that really effective in areas where there's problematic theft from vehicles, prolific offenders, drug trafficking, galloping goose, for instance. So we stop, we engage the individuals, and a lot of times we'll find, okay, they're transient, or they have warrants, or, obviously in the majority of cases, they're just good people, and it's really good PR for the police to have cordial conversations with people without having any issues. But those times that we do find the issues, we're able to apprehend. And I think you'll see the next, one of the lines in there is the bike unit. And so that bike unit started up this summer, and we've got in Colwood alone 12 arrests. They've got over 50 arrests in total here so far. It has been a huge success. And it's, with the Galloping Goose and all the trails that we're very fortunate to have in this area, having a four-person, right now we're only working with 2 people. After our staffing levels get up to full complement, we'll have 4 members fully equipped on bikes. And they'll be traveling the Galloping Goose and all the other trails. They'll be stopping in your businesses. I'm mandating them to hit 700 businesses per year. I want to see them stop and talk to business owners for no other reason, just to say hi, see how things are going, and be engaged with your businesses, with View Royal, with all of West Shore's businesses. And I think that'll be very well received. As far as traffic enforcement, unfortunately, we've been down 2 traffic members. One because of a personal tragedy within his family, so he's been off, but he's recently back to work, so that's great. And the other one was selected to a provincial dog, a drug detection dog. And I'm happy to say that even though they could put those dogs anywhere on the island, we were able to get both those dogs housed out of West Shore at no cost to your municipality. Those dogs would probably run $225,000 a year with the member. So you're getting they're for the whole island, but they're housed out of West Shore Detachment. So we will certainly see them within our community, and it's certainly a great add to our complement. I see we had 1 fatal this year. I think we had the same as last year there, which is unfortunate. Those types of files, just to reiterate how much time that, when we have a fatal car accident, it can tie up a member for weeks on end trying to gather all the evidence and bring in the analyst reports and to do a proper investigation. So they're very, very time consuming and obviously a tragedy in itself. I'm happy to say collisions were down 36%. And what I've done since I got here is I've listened to Mayor and Council and to a lot of the community members, and I know that traffic is one of the most frustrating things, whether it be on the street, the school grounds, the lagoon. I mean, I've heard a lot of the concerns here from the community. So what I've asked is that when they come to Council and they say, hey, well, first of all, we encourage them to call the RCMP, but if they're frustrated and they call any one of you, all I ask is that you simply email me with the complaint, and I directly send it, so I'm keenly aware of what's going on in the district, and then I send it to my traffic corporal, and he's compiling a list of all of these problematic areas. I've asked them to go knock on the doors of every complainant so that, first of all, we acknowledge their complaint, and that we work that area. Every 3 months, I'm going to ask that they come back to those areas within the 3 months and monitor those situations so that they don't have to call every 6 months, every year, saying, yeah, that was great, you came once, but now the speeding in the school zone is ramped up again. We'll have a compiled list of those addresses, and to continually engage the complainants so that they're aware that we are doing something for them. I'm meeting with URSU, the Integrated Road Safety Enforcement Unit, which, again, I will be asking for Lagoon Road. I know that that's a huge problematic area for Colwood. I'm going to ask they've been asking for priorities for the West Shore, and I can assure you that I'll be asking them that Lagoon Road be one of the priorities there. And I'm certainly open to council if there's anybody else. I'm meeting with them tomorrow. So if there's any other significant issues that councillors have heard of, please let me know. From a community-based issues, you know, in all the rural and small spots that I've served in, I have a keen understanding and appreciation for the power of being involved in the community. I love all the community stuff that we get, and I know we had a couple members at your light up here the other day. I know you have all your City of Festivals, or you're touted to soon be a City of Festivals, and I hope that we can be certainly more engaged from a community policing standpoint, and rather than solely as an enforcement unit. You know, we continue to partner with Royal Bay High School, and I've asked this yesterday to get a date firmed up. We do acting classes with a crisis negotiator. I'm actually a negotiator myself, but we have 10 crisis negotiators, hostage negotiators for Vancouver Island. And so I've partnered up and I've arranged with your high school teacher, your drama, grade 12 drama students, so that they'll act out scenarios that our negotiators will have to de-escalate the situation. And it goes over fantastic with the youth. And it's just a great initiative. And we've been doing that for the last 3 years, and we will continue to do that. I'd like to see in this community, in View Royal especially, some more elder initiatives. This is a retirement community. I think it would go over a long ways to have some dinners, or just to be engaged with a lot of your elders. We recently did Coffee with a Cop out in the Songhees First Nation, and that went over fantastic. And I've asked that be in all the communities, so that when we have people that have questions and concerns about how we're policing, or where we're policing, or what we're doing, or they just want to have a coffee and sit down and talk with us. Yeah, I think we'll be doing many of those in all 7 communities here that we police within the West Shore. I'm also hoping to put on a basketball tournament here for senior girls basketball, and so I'm reaching out right now to the school district and hoping the RCMP will put on a basketball tournament. I think we need to be engaged with female youth, especially at that age group. Other than that, I should probably open the mic to questions and concerns.
Thank you, Inspector. Before I go to council, I'll just see if I have some questions written down from the audience from earlier today. So let's, if you don't mind, I'll just ask those questions. So what does happen when your officers are taken away first? So for example, if there's an event where you lose officers because there's a international G7 event, and so we lose some officers, how do we backfill when the officers are away, or do we not?
Well, we don't. I mean, it's tough. All those resources will get pulled from various groups. We will backfill from within our own detachment. And if we're the sole detachment that is sending members to something, then we'll reach out to detachments like Soup, Lake Cowichan, Sydney, and we would put overtime shifts on to bring them in. The money that it costs us to ship them out, they're paid on a different collator. So we don't actually pay for, your Colwood's not paying for that service when they get shipped out for long periods of time, if that was part of the question.
I think that was close to it. And then the other one was the drunk driving numbers. It sounded like it was a number of like 1 out of every 125 people are.
Yeah, I mean, without
having a quick look.
Yeah, without having a calculator and doing the math in front of you here. So these numbers are calls for service, so that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a charge associated to that. So what that means is somebody has called and said that there's an impaired driver leaving X establishment. We then attend it. If you're looking for whether or not that was founded and charged, whether or not we found the driver, that's a different stat. So this is just calls for service, and then we go there and we're either A, able to found it and say, yes, it did happen. B, we're not sure if it unsubstantiated, which means it may or may not have happened. We just can't substantiate one way or the other. Or we pull the vehicle over and the individual is clearly sober and there's no issues, and that's unfounded. So if that addresses your question as well.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. So I will then go to council. Council questions? Councillor Dick?
Thank you. among the hats that I wear for council, I chair the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee. And one of the areas that I hear a lot of concerns about is the Mobile Youth Services Team, who are funded by all areas of the Capital Regional District, and who basically follow youth who are being sexually exploited and their pimps wherever they happen to go within this region. There is a great deal of lack of information on this problem area, and I would just like to hear your thoughts on what we might be able to do to support youth to avoid being targeted, and if there's anything that we could do to encourage you to engage with the Family Court and Youth Justice Committee to become more aware of where the hot spots are in the region and what's happening with them.
Okay. As far as, I mean, obviously it's a community issue, the youth and high-risk youth. I'm not 100% sure on the question that you're asking me, other than, I mean, MCERT, we are obviously involved with MCERT, as you know, and that's their job function, is to identify the youth and to assist with the high risk. Where were you going with the question?
Well, the Capital Region Action Team for Sexually Exploited Youth is a subcommittee of the Family Court Committee.
Okay.
We work with all areas. We are able to have members from Saanich and Victoria attend our meetings. We don't get very much engagement from the West Shore or Souk, and I would like to try to address that so that I can understand the situation as it's evolving in our area, as well as downtown and Saanich.
Okay. Well, perhaps you and I should talk over the coming week here.
Okay.
And no, absolutely. If our members are not, if we don't have a representation there, and I'm not aware if we are or we're not, we will.
Excellent. It's been a long time since we've seen anyone from West Shore, and I know there's been various staffing issues that have led to that. So I would love to see that addressed. The other question I have, I heard you say that you've been to a number of First Nations communities and smaller communities where a lot of our restorative justice initiatives have come from. And restorative justice has been identified to me through the courthouse here on the West Shore as an area that really could use some assistance. So I just wanted to flag that for you as something that you could perhaps help us in clearly articulating, perhaps through a resolution to AVICC or UBCM and to the province to do a better job of ensuring that all areas of the Capital Regional District have access to equitable restorative justice measures.
Yeah, no, I'm a firm believer of it as well. So, yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that's something that if you would like, perhaps you and I could work on that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Inspector Preston. First of all, I'd just like to commend you for your initiatives as far as the community involvement. I think it's key, and so I do want to give you a shout out for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the data that was provided. If I can just maybe make hopefully a constructive comment on them. When you first look at the numbers, right, we're given whole numbers. And to me, when I first look at them, I go, holy mackerel, I get all excited. Then I look at them again, and then you do the comparisons, and then you go, okay, so this is in line, because we're not there to micromanage what you do, obviously. And certainly some of the percentages, when you see these big, giant numbers, but then you look at it was only 4 incidents, and you had 1 increase, wow, then you have 25% increase. So I guess my question was, to me, would make it really easy for me to when I'm looking at these is maybe just trend lines, just how we're doing. And if we're seeing an increase in trend, then we know we got a problem. Because the numbers really will make us ask a lot of stupid questions, I guess I call them. But, so, I was just hoping, if you could just give us the trend lines, if we're going up or down and, over the years or over each quarter sort of thing, that would be great to see that.
I can definitely do that. I'll have I have an analyst that prepares the majority of the report here for me. And so, yeah, I can absolutely have her do that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
Councillor Parkinson?
So, Councillor Kobayashi scared me off asking what I really wanted to ask. But you did talk about perhaps some enforcement on Lagoon Road and talk to people about that. I think what I heard loud and clear when I was door knocking, and I suspect everybody else did too, was that the problem seems to have split between Millburn and Lagoon, that both roads are taking, too much traffic going too fast, and I would hate to see enforcement on Lagoon that just coerced people over to Millburn to cause more problems there. So if you could come up with a strategy that solved the problem on both roads at the same time, you get an attaboy?
We could do such a thing.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time and missing the Seahawks.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Sure. I mean,
yeah, we did. Yeah, don't tell us the score.
Yeah, we'll step outside, but I'd love to chat with you.
Thank you, Inspector.
Move to receive.
Motion to receive. Second. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Can I just make a comment that
You may.
if this had gone to Committee of the Whole, then he wouldn't have missed the Seahawks.
That's true. Yes, yeah. I'll make sure to get the 2019 schedule in place. Thank you. Jeez. 7.1, Finance and Administration report from the Director of Corporate Services regarding the Country Rose Pub, structural changes to the liquor license. The owners of the Country Rose Pub have applied to the province for a change in their liquor license that will increase their occupancy load from 118 people to 150 people to match the occupancy load of their facility and to allow for a new casual outdoor seating area that will operate only until dusk. You also have a motion in front of you. Does council have any questions? I'll go Councillor Baxter, then Day, then Jensen.
Well, I just note that this is another item that hasn't been to Committee of the Whole, and the public might have been interested. I know we have no authority, and we're trying to step back from that. But I just wonder why these things aren't going to Committee of the Whole, and if the answer is just issues of scheduling over Christmas, then I hope it'll be better after Christmas.
We'll go to staff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The reason it's not at Committee of the Whole first is we have to first make the decision if we want to participate in the application process or have the province undertake the public application process and the city just opts out. So if the province has questions of the city provides information and responses to their concern. But if the council themselves wants to undertake the process, which is at the council's expense, then the council decides how they want to do it. Do they want to do advertisements in the newspaper? Do they want to have a Committee of the Whole meeting? Whatever the process is. And then the end result of that is reporting back to the ministry on the method used to gather the public feedback, and then making sure that the resolution that you provide to them with respect to supporting or not supporting follows the very scripted criteria of the type of resolution that we would have to pass. So it's not at Committee of the Whole tonight because we're trying to find out, do you want to participate in the process or opt out and have the province undertake the process?
Okay, I see the logic of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I have seen a number of these types of referrals come across council's desk over the years. And for a period of time, it seemed logical that the citizens of Colwood would be able to comment on things that are inevitably perhaps going to affect them, whether it's that they want more space at the local pub, or they don't want the people to be seated outside because of noise issues. But with the fact that whatever input we gather, we have absolutely zero authority to do anything with, I find myself in agreement with the recommendation from the city that we opt out, because really and truly this is downloading, getting public input onto the city with no opportunity to actually make a difference. So I think that's just, I don't know, teasing our residents, because they're asked to comment, but it doesn't even matter what they say. So I would like to, unless I'm cutting off anyone else's discussion. All right, I would move the recommendation.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing that, sorry, it was Councillor Day and Councillor Jensen. Got it. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm at the right. Expense report. Yep. 7.1.4, Director of Finance, regarding the computer purchase program policy. Excuse me. The computer purchase policy was adopted in 2000. I'm sorry. Am I off the? Am I missed one? I apologize. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's why I was looking. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. You know what? I flipped my page too fast. Thank you. Recommendation for the expense reimbursement policy update. My apologies. This issue was discussed at the December 3rd Committee of the Whole meeting. The updated policy addresses per diems and reimbursement related to private accommodations. Council is requested to approve the new expense reimbursement policy 001. Does Council have any questions for staff? Seeing none, may I have a motion? No. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Day.
Seconded by me, that the amended expense reimbursement policy as presented at the December 3rd Committee of the Whole meeting before it did be approved. And I would just like to add that the benefit of this is that it removes an amount of bookkeeping that takes additional staff time. So although we're not putting any more money in the budget, this should result in some cost savings and certainly some work savings for staff.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. 7.1.3, recommendation purchasing power delegation bylaw number 1745, 2018. This issue was discussed at the December 3rd Committee of the Whole meeting, and the committee referred this bylaw to Council for enactment. Bylaw number 1748 will be considered under the bylaw section of this agenda. Does Council have any questions for staff? Seeing none, may I have a motion, please?
Your Worship, I'll move that the draft purchasing power delegation bylaw number 1748, 2019 before it be approved by Council.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan. Second by Councillor Jensen. Discussion? Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just would like to advise that the reason I will not be supporting this motion is that the limits that are in the bylaw are inconsistent with neighboring municipalities. In fact, they are higher. And I do not support Council delegating more to staff. I think that Council needs to stay in the loop and be well informed of the things that are impacting the citizens of Colwood.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Please note Councillor Day opposed. 7.1.4, Director of Finance, Computer Purchasing Policy. Let's try this one again. The computer purchasing policy was adopted in 2009. It was intended to help employees purchase computer equipment to enhance their computer literacy. Staff believe that this can be better served and better achieved through professional development planning, and recommends that this policy be rescinded. Does Council have any questions for staff? I'll go Councillor Baxter, then Councillor Day.
Are there any agreements currently in existence?
I'll look to staff.
Yes, I believe we have one agreement that is nearing being paid in full.
So if it's nearing being paid in full, I take it it'll be allowed to live out its life?
And yes, staff's intention was to complete any existing agreements and to not allow any new agreements to come into effect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
He stole my question, so that's great. Thank you.
Councillor Kobayashi. Sure, yeah, you can make a motion.
Motion that the council agrees to rescind computer policy
We rescind computer purchase policy COM 0003, and this will remove the small administrative burden of the current program.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 7.1.5, report from the Director of Corporate Services regarding the 2019 AVICC Annual General Meeting and Convention and Resolutions Notice Request for Submissions. The Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities is holding their annual general meeting, and convention from April 12th to 14th in Powell River. Currently, 2 or 3 members of council usually attend. However, our CAO recommends that starting in 2019, Council's annual training and professional development budget includes sufficient funds for all 7 members to attend this annual Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Community Conventions. Staff would like to know who will be attending in 2019 so that they can manage the registration process. And I do have a motion if Council wishes to work with what the staff are recommending. And I can easily read that if that's the will of this council. So, first of all, discussion. Councillor Parkinson?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear from people who have been before about the value of all 7 of us going. Seems a bit much.
Okay. Councillor Day?
Thank you. It's an interesting fact that for many years, Colwood belonged to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, but they did not belong to our local chapter, the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. The benefit of belonging to the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities is that that is where you need to go if you wish to propose any resolutions to be presented at UBCM. Because the format is that you would attend this conference, you would propose any resolutions that you felt were important to advocate for the provincial government to take up, and the full debate would be held at the association. And then if it was successful after debate at that association, it would then be forwarded to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities. When we were not a member of the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities, it was very difficult to propose any resolution to the province unless it was an emergent issue, in which case it could be raised from the floor at UBCM. So this was purely a cost savings measure in the early days, because by not being a member of AVICC, we did not have to pay those dues. Now that, I think, was a little unfair to the association and to UBCM because it did not allow them to fully consider our voice in what they did. So we were the very last area of Vancouver Island to join that association, and the value of attending has been proven out to me a number of times through being able to participate with our local neighbors on issues of mutual concern. So to that end, not everybody has to go, but to have the opportunity to go, I think, is quite important. Those of us who are new to this process, I think, would find it very valuable to be at the convention, because you become more familiar with the rules and regulations, you're better equipped to present information to council after you've had to stand up and speak in front of a crowd of, several hundred people several times. And you were also able to engage with other areas that are close to home to work on issues of mutual interest. So I've heard it said numerous times, one of the opportunities is to become a member of the executive, either a member at large or a president, for which there are a number of openings right now. And without voices from the Capital Regional District on the AVICC, it becomes much less effective as a lobby group for the interests of our area. And that has been pointed out to me a number of times by a number of members. The South Island has often been poorly represented on this association. So if anyone's interested in participating and learning more, I think it's a great opportunity to hone both your skills as an advocate for necessary changes to support our community, but also as your personal ability to do a better job on council.
That answer your questions, Councillor Parkland? Okay. Any other discussion? Councillor Tobias?
Just a quick question. How many people have we sent in the past?
I think the most people who've been able to attend has been 3 in the past. The convention moves around. It's been in Victoria, it's been in Langford, I've been to Powell River before, it's been in Campbell River, it's been in Tofino, Ucluelet. It's a little bit, it's kind of like UBCM. They kind of do the Victoria area one year and somewhere else the next. And I think the value has been very good at times, always better when more people get involved and make sure that the issues that are being brought up are truly of interest to those of us who are in attendance. So it has been good. It absolutely could be even better.
So if there's no other questions, staff are recommending this proposed motion that staff be directed to include annual funding in the council training and professional development budget for all 7 members of council to attend the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Convention starting in 2019.
I'd be willing to make that motion, and if not all of us go, the money just stays in the budget.
All right, moved by Councillor Day. Second by Councillor Baxter. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Oh,
I'd just like to say that I'm supporting this. One of the experiences that really makes me support it is I remember Councillor Day some years ago coming back from AVICC and telling me all about the presentation they'd had on sea level rise. And I thought, at last, one of our institutions is taking this seriously, and meaning AVICC, and Councillor Day talked about how much we share in common on this island, and this is not just on the island, of course, but it's coastal communities, including obviously Powell River, and we share a common peril that I'm sure we'll get a lot out of talking to others about how they view that and what steps they're going to take.
Thank you. Any other? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 7.1.6, Director of Corporate Services regarding the appointment to CRD Regional Water Commission and the Juan de Fuca Water Distribution Commission, council members for a 4-year term. Council announced at their November 26th meeting that council appointments to the 2 water commissions would be considered at the December 10th meeting. The appointments of a director and an alternate director is required for both commissions, and all appointments are for a 4-year term. No public submissions were received. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who would like to comment on the appointment of water commissioners? Seeing none, previously through my council decisions when planning appointments, council agreed that Councillor Logan would be the director of both commissions and that Councillor Day would be the alternate. Does council have any other questions for staff? Seeing none, may I have a motion that requires the appointment of the director and the alternate? So moved. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, second by Councillor Jensen. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 7.1.7, Director of Corporate Services regarding the Advisory Planning Commission Council Liaison appointments. The Advisory Planning Commission bylaw stipulates that 2 elected officials are to be appointed as council liaisons to serve as the city's Advisory Planning Commission as non-voting members. We have not appointed anyone, and we have not had this discussion. Is there any discussion by council on those 2 appointments? Seeing none, may I make a I'm sorry, Councillor Day, my apologies.
No problem. I know it gets to be a lot. I only wanted to comment that the appointments of the liaisons to the APC are quite important in terms of being able to inform the Advisory Planning Commission members of what areas of concern the council may want to have information on. I think that's a very important role, and it does take a good amount of knowledge and consideration and time of the person who is appointed as the liaisons to be able to effectively give the right information to the Advisory Planning Committee. It doesn't mean that you need to agree with everything that they say or do, but it does help them a great deal to be able to know what kind of information council is looking to get from their investigation of the issues.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
I'd like to volunteer to take one of the positions.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Parkinson.
Well, somebody's got to balance Michael, so I'll volunteer too.
Yeah, I do. Please.
Two-thirds of the engineers for the liaison position.
Great, thank you.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Jensen, seconded by Councillor Logan. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 8.1, we're into bylaws now. Let me just confirm. We're into bylaws. Bylaw number 1734, third reading only, for the Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151, 1989, amendment number 164, zone 233. I'm not going to read all that number. The public hearing for bylaw number 1734 was held on December 4th, 2018. Bylaw number 1734 is before council tonight for consideration of third reading. The bylaw must be approved by the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure before it can be considered for final reading. 2 members of council were not in attendance at the December 4th public hearing. Because the report on the public hearing has not been provided to council yet, I will ask staff to provide a verbal report on the public hearing so that the 2 absent members can participate in the discussion and vote on third reading on bylaw number 1734.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the public hearing was held on Tuesday, December 4th, 2018 for bylaw number 1734, cited as the Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151, 1989, amendment number 164, CD 25 zone for 2330 and 2344 or through to 2344 B Souk Road, bylaw number 1734, 2018. The general purpose of the bylaw number 1734 is to amend the Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151, 1989, to rezone the lands located at 2330 Souk Road, 2342 Souk Road, 2344A Souk Road, and 2344B Souk Road, legally described as Lot A, Section 68, Esquimalt District, Plan 15764, Lot 1, Section 68, Esquimalt District, Plan 21735, Lot A and B, Section 68, Esquimalt District, Plan 42518. And that portion of road with an area of approximately 458 meters squared shown on as road on Plan 42518 that lies between Lot A and Lot B, as created by Plan 42518. To permit a mixed residential development consisting of 86 residential units, attached dwellings, rental apartments, and condominiums, 16 townhouse units, 30 market housing units, 40 rental apartments units secured by registered covenant for not less than a period of 10 years. There will be a total of 138 parking spaces, and of that, approximately 10 visitor spaces. At the public hearing, approximately 70 members of the public attended the meeting. 21 members of the public took the opportunity to speak, and 3 written submissions were received after the creation of information binder, but prior to the start of the hearing. Reasons stated by the public opposed to the development were that there be additional on-site parking to reduce, which may impact parking on nearby residential streets. There'd be increased vehicle traffic to Souk Road and adjacent neighborhoods, pedestrian safety concerns, including the disabled and getting to transit and other areas and services, and insufficient transit service. Reasons stated by the public in support: it creates affordable housing. There would be an extension of sewers. Traffic was already a problem, not just a Colwood issue. This development will provide improvements to infrastructure and to pedestrian safety. This type of development is needed in Colwood and will encourage economic growth, provides for affordable housing. The 40% green space that was offered as part of this package was also cited as an area of support because it created buffers. Design includes additional landscaping and fencing to enhance privacy. Increased transit service expected because of higher demand, and the development suits the area considering it could have been rezoned to a higher density or include commercial uses. Thank you.
Then I will go to the motion. May I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Move third reading.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. Second discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My concern tonight has been that the report of the public hearing should have been available to the public so that they could comment or ensure that the comments that they made were accurately recorded. Of the submissions, the written submissions that were received on the night of the public hearing, several of them were from residents who live close by, and all of them spoke to concerns about parking and traffic. Now, while I recognize that traffic is heavy on Souk Road and is a problem regardless of whether this development goes forward, the problem that I see with it is that it entrenches an offset intersection. So it is creating what I believe will be a future traffic hazard in terms of creating more accidents and a less safe road form for the future. Among the concerns that were brought to our attention is that when the traffic study was done, it was done between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. in the morning for the morning rush hour. And this is at the end of the rush hour, not at the peak of the problem time. And the traffic impact study suggested that turning right instead of turning left out of the development, it adds a considerable length to the journey that those cars will be taking, increasing the impact of the carbon footprint, and the lack of safety for pedestrians. In fact, one of the proposals or the comments that we received talked about the need to create the center lane on Souk Road, and it does not provide for the safe movements of cars left out or left in to the development. So while, I think that the developer has done a very good job of trying to fit the development onto into an established neighborhood and minimize the impacts to the existing homes, the impact to the traffic in Colwood has not been mitigated in any way, and regardless of the dedication of the road area in front of the development, I believe that this still leaves us with an unsafe traffic pattern for the future that we have no way to mitigate in the future.
Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Worship. We had some very great discussion actually at the public hearing, and I was very impressed at all the points that were brought up. Very valid points and valid perspectives. There's a couple that I wanted to touch on, so through you to our director. One is parking, and my understanding is that the city's requirement for parking on this particular piece of property exceeds the bylaw requirement. Just want to confirm that.
Through your worship, I wish I had the numbers directly in front of me to show that access. What's happening here is that the parking ratio for small car wasn't quite meeting the intent because those were considered as traditional parking stalls. Part of this consideration is to consider those traditional parking stalls as enabling smaller car. So there's a potential loss to the depth of a stall for a large vehicle, but the small car count versus the car count is about equal.
Okay, thank you. The other issue, as identified at the public hearing, was the ability to safely turn left or have a left-hand turn lane onto Linlark, as an example. Now, regardless of whether this development went forward or not, some action probably would have to be taken on at that particular juncture. Can you comment on what plans are envisioned for that, please?
Through your worship, Councillor Logan is correct that the traffic study does not speak to a left turn component. However, Council has indicated that they wish the improvements along Souk Road to be realized to meet the traffic master plan, which includes for the creation of a center median where possible, which alternates as a left turn pocket. That was not able to be discussed at the public hearing because it was information about the local improvement at the direct street. But there is an intention to create a left turn pocket that has been discussed with the developer with the intention to build it.
Thank you. Your worship, to that end, I will be supporting this project. It's my opinion that this project actually is vital for that particular area. It represents a significant improvement to an area that needs some updating, and really that's one part of Souk Road that has been very neglected. It has no sidewalks, lighting is poor, and what this project does is it actually takes that first step in providing curb gutter and sidewalk safe pedestrian access along that route. But and just from my personal experience over the last number of years, I have never seen a developer be so responsive to the neighborhood. We have seen setbacks double from their neighbors on Linlark because of community concern. And then we recently had heard that one of the blocks of the townhouses, actually all the blocks have been separated to let more light and air flow, but also one of the blocks has been reduced from 3 stories to 2 stories to mitigate the impact on the neighbors along Linlark. Furthermore, the developer and this project has bought into the official community plan prior to it being adopted and its adaptive planning principles. That is, working with the land and maximizing opportunities without significantly impacting the environment. So what we see here on a beautiful piece of property is the retention of 40% green space. To me, that provides significant value to the neighborhood and to the population in general. And frankly, I have not seen that in the past, and so I think the opportunities here certainly are a win-win for the municipality. I recognize that there's an impact certainly in the neighborhood because it's a change. But I also reflect back on what could be on this property if this project did not go ahead. And certainly I think there could be more density on that property. But the project realizes that this is probably the most appropriate for them, and based on what the neighborhood has said, higher density that the city could see on that piece of property may not be appropriate. But from my perspective, I think it checks all the boxes in addressing many of the wants and the needs of the current OCP, and it really, I think, will kickstart some much-needed improvements along that corridor. And I mean, if we don't approve projects, then we won't realize some of the infrastructure benefits and improvements that we all heard were demanded by the public during the last election. And the only way we're going to be able to provide those infrastructure improvements is if we approve projects such as this, or we tax the hell out of our residents. And I'm not sure that is necessarily palatable. So I will be supporting that based on those reasons stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson, then Councillor Jensen, and then Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Worship. So firstly, I guess this is a nice site. It's where I think in Colwood we should be happy to have sites like this that are suitable for redevelopment. I also have to commend the developer. He's come in here with a new council and a new OCP, first one through, so kind of a gutsy move, frankly. And as the new rookie councillor, I may be making some mistakes in what I say here. I may not have things quite right. I may not have processes or facts down pat. And I would certainly encourage anybody at the table or at the staff to correct me if I'm doing things wrong. But I have tried to do my homework on this one. So the information I have and that I've been using, I have the bylaw, I have the report of, I think it's either May 7th or June 5th from Director of Planning to Council. I have one, I'm not sure when it is, from, it talks about, oh, that's the same one, bylaw 1734, sorry. I have one excerpt of minutes from October 9th, 2018, talking about essentially adding on the covenant on rental housing. Another report, 9/26, I guess that's September 26th, to council. And I have the OCP. So I kind of tried to marry that stuff to understand this project and what it's saying. And there's a number of things that stood out to me. The new OCP talks about 4-story buildings and up to 6 stories in limited areas, with good reasons, I presume. And I think perhaps the condo building, the way it steps down the hillside, perhaps justifies, an exception to go to 6 stories if an exception is required. The apartment building that's just 6 stories, there doesn't seem to be any justification presented for 6 stories. If the concept is that we believe in 4 stories, except in limited occasions going to 6, I didn't hear anything that sort of convinced me. The density, right now it's hillside shoreline at 10 units per hectare. It's clearly in the OCP as part of the transit growth area. Transit growth area talks about 17 units per hectare minimum as being appropriate for something that's likely to be well served by transit. And then they're using the neighborhood designation, which has a 50 to 70 unit per hectare range. I looked at the OCP. The neighborhoods seem to reflect, I think, Lagoon and Machosen and Souk and Kelly. I didn't see this being considered a neighborhood area, but anyway, that was the designation that seemed to come through in the reports, that as part of, if it was to be considered as a neighborhood, the 50 to 70 units was the range. They're saying the density here is 67 units per hectare. And density really is a very, very fluid number. sure, it's 67 units per hectare. If you look at the whole site, they're talking of dividing it into two, which would have one, the townhouse development at a lower number, and the condos and a rental on one site, which would have a density of about 140 units per hectare. So, you know, again, it's how you want to look at it. If you look at all one project or two projects. And again, there's some confusion. Obviously, the one site, the 67 units per hectare, talks about it all as one site. In the stuff we have in front of us, they talk about dividing it into two sites. The architect's letter talks about separating the market housing, the townhouses, and the condo, separating from the rental. That's not what the Site 1 and Site 2 plan does. So, again, you know, some confusion there, I think. Probably not insurmountable. I guess the rental agreement, this is rental for 10 years and then do what you want. It just, frankly, doesn't do much for me. You know, rental should be rental. To say you can rent them for 10 years and then they can sell them is just really, it's just sort of a strange condo project. You know, they're going to be condominiums. Obviously, the developer's going to go to the expense of making them all individual units, individual meters, individual this, condoize them, but there will be requirements to say there can only be rented for 10 years. I'm sure the city doesn't want to get in and trying to enforce that to say whether somebody who owns one of the units actually lives in it or rents it for the first 10 years. So, again, to me, frankly, I guess if it's to be considered rental housing, it should be rental housing. This sort of kind of rental and kind of not doesn't do anything for me. The infrastructure, I looked at the infrastructure they're talking about. They're going to install the sewer from Kildu. That's a nice thing for them to do. I recognize that. There was some talk in the presentation of the stormwater where they had some wording about infiltration and swales and whatnot. If they're going to try to infiltrate the stormwater from this site, they're probably going to need an area to do it in. You know, these infiltration beds for stormwater can look sort of like large septic fields, so they might need an area to do it in. I wasn't clear on what they were talking about there. And again, I recognize I'm coming in late to the process. With the public hearing, I didn't have a chance to ask those questions, so I apologize. Parking. Councillor Logan asked about parking. There was an answer. Got to be honest, I didn't understand it. Something to do with small cars versus regular cars. Now, you know, the information that was sent out was that there was going to be a deficit of 46 parking stalls, 127 total. At the public hearing, they talked about 138 parking stalls. So it sounds like there's been some change since this information came out. The numbers they're using, they say 1.5 per condo unit, 1 per apartment, 2.6 per townhouse, and I think that was bumped to 3.1 per townhouse to get to the 138 number. And then they say, well, out of all that, 0.1 is for the rental, is for the visitor parking, which means the apartment is down to 0.9 parking stalls per unit for renters, I suppose, and the rest is I just honestly don't think that's enough. You know, I live in an apartment complex, and I get the concept. I know people would like to see less cars, less vehicles, and there's some thought that by coercing people to have less vehicles, we'll have less vehicles and less pollution and so on. I'm not a believer. I think people are going to have the number of cars that they'd like to have and want to have. I think we heard a lot about the neighborhood was that there wasn't sufficient place anywhere for overflow parking if there wasn't enough parking provided initially. I believe that's going to be a problem. It also worries me in these types of developments when we talk about parking that we don't sit back and say, well, who's going to live here and what kind of vehicles are they going to drive? You know, the underground parking is a wonderful amenity. I know it's expensive, but it really doesn't work if you're a tradesman driving a big F-350 truck, or if you're bringing a trailer, or you have a big van. So you do need some exterior parking as well as interior parking, I believe. When I do the numbers, you know, if they are looking at the 3.1 per townhouse, if we separate out the townhouse parking, which again, 2.5 was probably okay. If they've gone to 3.1, I'm not quite sure how they changed the numbers from the 127 to 138. But if we take out the townhouses and look at what's involved in the condominium and rental, again, from this report, they say the condominium spaces provided is 46 out of a bylaw requirement out of 57. Rental apartment is 43 out of a bylaw requirement of 75. You know, what's being proposed is 67% of the bylaw requirement. So, and there doesn't seem to be a backup. You know, if there is overflow, it's gonna impact the neighbor. It doesn't seem good. So I worry a lot about the parking. And I think one of the things that we all have to think about at this table when we're looking at development is affordability. It's obviously a buzzword. It's very important, and we want affordability. But you'd think that putting more units on a piece of land would sort of equate to affordability. But my belief and my somewhat experience is that it's just what the market dictates is what things are worth and what they sell for. And that's the scary part of the development game. That's why it's such a tough game, and I admire people that are in it, that you know, they're starting out today to try and hit a market 2 or 3 years down the road that may be significantly different from this, and sometimes they'll win and sometimes they don't. So, you know, I don't want to, you know, I certainly respect the guys at what they're doing and the risks they're taking. But if they wanted to put some affordability, they could look at the costs of once you're into a building, these rental buildings. And again, I speak from a little bit of experience. You know, things like geothermal systems are wonderful for keeping down your operating costs, but you know, they need to go in initially. They can't really be added on later. So that's a concern. You know, in my complex, the developer spun that off to a third party, so the strata pays for it over time instead of it being part of the initial build out and purchase. You know, things like the lighting in the hallways all night long is if somebody could address that, that would be an affordability thing to keep your monthly costs down. I think that'd be important. And one thing that's, you know, a bit of a hobby horse for me, because you know I'm trying to get in Michael's good books, is over the life of this project, electric vehicles will, I believe, become the norm. I think we're seeing some great strides coming in electric vehicles, and that means that you should have plug-ins for electric vehicles as part of the project. Now, maybe they were going to do that anyway, and maybe it's a market thing as opposed to, probably not something we can regulate, but it doesn't, you know, again, those things would have resonated with me and made me a little happier if I'd heard some of that. As far as, you know, what does the city get? I mean, there's a list in here of what flows to the city in the way of fees and whatnot. And I think most of the fees for, you know, building permits and planning and that, I think those are legislated to be revenue neutral, so they're not a big thing. The DCCs are essentially development paying its share of major projects. Amenity charges are nice to have, thank you, but I think the numbers haven't been looked at for quite some time. They're getting a little dated maybe. Didn't see much in the way of off-site infrastructure upgrades, you know, even sidewalks to bus stops and whatever. So again, that, you know, I wasn't convinced on that. So I absolutely believe this is a site where there's a development and a good development to be achieved. I don't want to get hung up on every syllable in the OCP. I'm not. It's new. It's certainly not perfect. I'm not going to say if it doesn't exactly conform, it's not right. But I just didn't see. I worry mostly about parking and other things. So I'm concerned about this project.
Councillor Jensen.
I did have questions for staff. The turn in and out off Lynn Larkan out of this development area, can you speak how that would work if you were going to head into town? Left turns, I'm thinking specifically.
The left turn pocket that would be created into the site is from a movement from Veterans Memorial Parkway, so southbound on Veterans Memorial Parkway, westbound onto Souk Road, and then northbound into the site. So if you were going to head to town out of the site, driveways are considered driveways. They're not considered intersections. So it's up to the resident to pick their most appropriate time. But a person could choose to go left or right. If you read the information in the traffic study, it's saying that the predominant amount of users may choose to go right just simply for convenience, which would take them to the arterial roadways designed by the Ministry of Transportation and Highways, which are Souk Road to Veterans Memorial Parkway. However, there is gap spacing created by the signalized intersections on either end, being Wachosn Road and Veterans Memorial Parkway, so a party may choose to go left. With that left turn pocket, it creates a center divide in the middle of the road, for enough room for a car to sit in. That pocket has to have essentially an opposite end to it, which will create a gap space. It won't be, it's not intended to be signed or delineated or marked for a car to sit into it as an acceleration point, but a car could occupy it. Ultimately, it will be based on the user's choice on which way they choose to go, and whether gap spacing permits that.
Thank you. And one further question. So if the stars align and Ministry of Transportation wants to do a bus priority lane all the way to Souk, something along those lines, I mean, does the engineering, I mean, I understand that would be a complete redo along the road, but would the original engineering, I guess, would it be able to be moved or remediated, or would it be completely useless, or have we even turned our minds to this?
No transit priorities are an excellent thing. So through your worship, this developer has agreed to provide an additional land dedication outside and beyond the traffic master plan as well, or transportation master plan, as well as outside as what is shown in the report. The intention for that extra land grab, theoretically, is to create a fourth lane, a third and fourth lane in both directions. The ability to realize that lane is not today. It is a ways off once future land gets grabbed. It may provide room for an interim deceleration lane. It might provide the opportunity for transit. It depends on what occurs with traffic over the course of time.
And the frontage will include, I mean, obviously we heard about sidewalks and stuff like that, but I take it would be a dedicated bike lane?
Through your worship, the intention for the frontage will include a bike lane, which has a buffer on it, and sidewalks. Staff, that's presently at staff, not at the council table. We're considering using multi-use paths and how to go about doing that in the best way to as well manage the traffic flow. So all those factors actually come after this process. If the developer has a project, we'll go into the design stage with the engineering team.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
I think that a significant fact here is that the OCP designates Souk Road as transit development, I think it's called. And the reason for that is that Souk Road is an obvious place for the development of high-frequency transit. Although there isn't any there currently, one of the ways you get there is with developments like this. If you increase density, transit comes to service it. If you don't increase density, you'll never get it. I've seen a somewhat similar development in my own neighborhood, where a couple of apartment buildings were built on a largish site that came available, and I've got to say it's really hard to find anybody in the neighborhood who now objects to it. It sounds like in this case we have a developer who's similarly inclined to try and accommodate the neighborhood to the one that developed in my own neighborhood, and these things are part of getting us to the transit services that we need, and they're part of providing somewhere for our kids and me when I'm an old folk and I don't want to look after a garden anymore, people like me, to move into. Single family housing fits a large part of your life, but certainly that's not where you're going when you're 20. And although I completely agree with Stuart's comments on affordability, that every piece of property will get what the market will bear at the time. And actually with the 40% green space at the back of this, that'll probably increase what the market's prepared to pay for it. But on the other hand, these are fairly small units, and that does decrease what the market's prepared to pay for it. So, and plus they're doing rental at least for 2 years. I imagine the conversion of that at the end of 10, did I say 2? I meant 10 years. The conversion at the end of 10 years will depend upon how much profit is being made on the rentals, how well that's working, and what the market is at the time. But I think, as Gordy said, this ticks a lot of boxes in the OCP. The OCP is very new. It's received the approval of the community very recently, and after much public input. So I think it's fair to say that that's something that should really be taken into account strongly in this case. I recognize there will be difficulties with traffic and with parking, perhaps, although I haven't seen that develop near as much as people think it will in the last 12 years in Colwood. But Souk Road will be a difficult place, same as any of our arterials are, to get in and out of. But Gordy, we're not just going to electric cars, we're going to autonomous cars and transportation as a service. And eventually we're only going to solve our traffic problems either with heavier use of buses or with autonomous vehicles. And either way, it takes away a good deal of the traffic issue. Temporarily, it will be there. So I will be supporting this.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the question.
For the answer to a question that Councillor Parkinson asked, I just wanted to know what the correct parking numbers are.
Staff.
I wish I had those numbers directly in front of me as a comparative from pre to post. What I do have in front of me is the numbers as presented with this project. It is
yeah, 138.
Sorry, just give me a second. Excuse me. While I gather my papers. What do I do with it? There it is. So it is. Parking spaces shall be provided at 1.5 spaces per apartment dwelling unit, 1.0 per rental apartment dwelling unit, and 2.6 per attached dwelling unit. Within areas 1 and 2 of the required parking, 0.1 parking space per dwelling unit shall be designated for vehicle use only.
Is that an extra question, Councillor Day?
I think the total number was 138 then?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number in front of me and would rather be correct on it.
Councillor Jensen.
So further to Councillor Parkinson's points, and this is directed to staff, there are some question marks in his mind, and I think there are some answers that we would be seeking along the way. I take it this is not something that, some of these issues are not something that is not insurmountable through the development process here, and as this unfolds. I guess what I'm getting at, we don't need to consider every last little detail here. A lot of this will get flushed out through the development process with staff along the way.
So if asked to go through the list that Councillor Parkinson, sorry, through your worship, if asked to go through the list that Councillor Parkinson advised, I've been keeping records of it. The 10-year rental clause is something that stands. The covenant that will be bared is a factor of council derivative or not. Stormwater master plan is something that comes forward after this project moves forward and is a staff level of exercise. Acceptance of the transportation master plan has already been endorsed by council. The traffic study is again a staff level exercise, and we're down to the actual implementation of that, of which the Director of Engineering in the city will consider the ability to apply today versus tomorrow, so that we can either have a partial sidewalk or complete that as another intent. There was other comments about the parking variance. That my apologies for not having that direct number for exactly what was pre to what is today, so we could directly talk about those numbers. Electric vehicle plug-ins. That's a factor for the developer in terms of marketing their units. However, if council wished to make that a requirement to improve the marketability or to reach out to the developer, that would be a choice of council. And I believe that almost captures it. Almost captures the questions that I have written down, because there were some factors about affordability and amenity charges that I'm certainly willing to receive and make further amendments on reports as coming forward as future.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions before I call the question? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Please note that Councillor Day and Councillor Parkinson opposed. Moving on to bylaw number 1748, first, second, and third reading, purchasing power delegation bylaw number 1748, 2019.
Move introduction.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan. Anybody?
8.2.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Baxter. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. You opposed? Okay. Councillor Day opposed.
Move second.
Thank you, Councillor Logan. Second by Councillor Parkinson. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Please note that Councillor Day opposed. Third reading. Thank you, Councillor Jensen. Councillor Baxter seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Please note that Councillor Day opposed. Bylaw number 1749, first, second, third reading, Colwood Main Sewer Local Area Service Bylaw Establishment and Loan Authorization Bylaw number 598-2001, Amendment number 71, 2442 Souk Road. Thank you.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Baxter, second, but you got it. I don't need to say it. Never mind. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried?
Move second.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not saying it. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, you do have a discussion. My apologies. Councillor Parkinson.
I just have to, much as with the expense policy where we changed a policy to get rid of a bunch of busy work by staff on counting it, can we look for a way to not have to go through this for every property that hooks up to the sewer? I mean, I've been told that it's tough and it has to be this way, but boy, it just seems crazy.
This is dreamy compared. Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. I can't help you with that one. Discussion? Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. Sorry, where are we? Was that second? Thank you. Second. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. Bylaw number 1750, first, second, and third reading, Colwood's Central Sewer Local Area Establishment and Loan Authorization Bylaw number 480, 1999, Amendment number 9. Move first. Thank you. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. Councillor Jensen, thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move third. Motion for third, pardon me. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Jensen. Second by Councillor Baxter. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Sorry, I've been lost now. Was that? We're on 52? Okay. Bylaw number 1752, first, second, third reading. Colwood Main Sewer Local Service Area and Loan Authorization Bylaw 598-2001, Amendment number 72.
Move for introduction, Your Worship.
Thank you. Dr. Kobayashi again. I don't know why I'm saying. I got your name right, and now I'm calling you doctor all the time. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. Move Jensen and
second.
Baxter. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried?
Move third.
Thank you.
Second, third.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then, that was 46, correct? Okay, first, second, and third reading of bylaw number 1746, Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy bylaw number 1746, 2018.
Question.
You can't do it until second.
Okay.
Move, Councillor Parkinson.
Second.
Am I boring you, Councillor Logan? All those in favor? Opposed? Nobody opposed. Motion for second. Moved by Councillor Jensen, second by Councillor Parkinson. Discussion. Councillor Baxter, then Councillor Day.
This is actually addressing the last two bylaws here. One of them says that the purpose of it, or at least one of the purposes of it, is to replace the description of the corporate head as an officer. Sorry, the corporate officer. Replace that name with Director of Corporate Services, if I've got that right. And yet the other bylaw actually perpetuates the first name rather than replacing it. I'm sorry I didn't bring this up earlier in the day. But does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Whether it's the corporate officer or the director of corporate services, right?
Yeah, I mean, it should be the same in both bylaws, surely. Yeah, the second one names the officers as including the Director of Corporate Services. But 46 just calls it the corporate officer in 4.1. The head is named as the corporate officer.
Sure.
I'll look to staff.
Okay, I think I know what you're saying. I'm not positive I know that what you're saying. So in bylaw 1746, which is the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy bylaw, the current bylaw that we have on the books identifies the Chief Administrative Officer as being the head, and we want to change that because it's actually the Director of Corporate Services, who is actually the corporate officer as well, is the one that actually manages all the information and privacy from beginning to end, all the approvals and so on. So in that particular bylaw, though, we've used the phrase, the head being the let me make sure I'm on the right bylaw, excuse me, the corporate officer, because it also allows us to hopefully evolve over time. We can create a deputy corporate officer role or perhaps a separate corporate officer role, and we wouldn't have to make a change to the bylaw. So it would just be one of the duties that's going to fall under the corporate officer. It's just in today's structure, the Director of Corporate Services, which is me, but will soon be Selena, is the corporate officer as well. Under the other bylaw, the change is that we had the officer position, which is one of the statutory positions, corporate administration. That fell to the title of corporate officer, and at the time, we had a Director of Administration and corporate officer as a title for a position. Now that position is called Director of Corporate Services, and we want the officer bylaw to reflect the proper title, and then again, the Director of Corporate Services is also the named corporate officer. I'm not sure if that addresses it
That
for you.
makes total sense to me. Thank you very much. Well, basically, in bylaw 1746, they're using the name of the position that has to exist because it's in reference to the position, whatever that person's job title is. Whereas in 1751, it has to be the job title because that refers to a specific person. Is that a good synopsis?
Sort of.
Any other questions on second reading? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. Got Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Bylaw number 1751, first, second, and third reading. Colwood Officers Bylaw number 1751, 2018.
Move introduction. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. It was Councillor Logan, then Councillor Parkinson. Any discussion? Councillor Baxter?
You looked a little terrified when you saw I had my hand up there.
Yep.
In this bylaw takes care of appointing deputies for various people, but not for the Director of Finance. Is this because we operate without a Deputy Director of Finance? I know, for instance, that we can't operate without somebody in the position of administrator or deputy administrator, but I don't have the experience in finance to know whether you simply operate without it. But I just wanted an explanation of why that deputy is not covered.
I'll go to staff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We actually do have a position that is the Deputy Director of Finance. That's Jen Hepting, who's sitting here this evening. So when the Director of Finance is away, she can step in. When he's actually here, there's a number of things, being a deputy, that she can also step in and manage on behalf of the Director or with respect to what her actual job position duties are. So there is a deputy. There is no Deputy Director of Corporate Services. There's no Deputy CAO, unless he assigns somebody when he's absent.
You're batting 1,000 for logical explanations. Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. So I'm just curious if assigning the designation as the Deputy Corporate Officer to the CAO represents a change in the way that we operate.
Where are we?
I'm on page 149 of 150, and under Officers of the City 3.2, it says the Chief Administrative Office is designated as the Deputy Corporate Officer and shall perform the duties of the Corporate Officer in the latter's absence.
Thank you. And through the Mayor, that is exactly as the wording is in the bylaw that we will be rescinding on adoption of this bylaw. And the reason that we have that in play is that we don't have a Deputy Corporate Officer position. So if the corporate officer is absent, but maybe it's only for a day or two, not where we've actually appointed our administrative support to be our acting corporate officer, then by default, the Chief Administrative Officer has the authority to act as the corporate officer in the deputy.
Okay. So, and that does not represent a change from the way that we're doing things now.
That's correct.
Because there are considerable responsibilities on the corporate officer under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy legislation. So I was just concerned if there was a change that the deputy would be able to perform those duties in their absence.
So it is exactly as we've had it in the past, and our expectation would be, if there's any reason that the corporate officer is not available to perform, the Chief Administrative Officer would step in as the deputy. If the corporate officer is away for any period of time, normally our trigger is 5 days or more, we can actually assign an acting corporate officer, and the acting corporate officer is our Administrative Assistant 4, who is being trained in and performing the duties of an Information and Privacy Coordinator. Our expectation is to train her to that higher level to be able to step in and manage information and privacy. So it's a little bit of a shuffle, but without a permanent deputy corporate officer position, this is the best case scenario for us.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So I can get it. Yeah. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. In-camera, release of in-camera resolutions. I would like to advise the public that the following December 10th, 2018 in-camera council resolutions were released from their in-camera classifications. Board of Variance appointments. that Dr. Mr. David Adair and Mrs. Debbie Harper be appointed to the city's Board of Variance for a 3-year term to expire December 31st, 2021, and that Mr. Demetrio Strezza be reappointed to the city's Board of Variance for a 3-year term to expire December 31st, 2021, and I apologize to that gentleman if I mispronounced his name. Also, council decisions that the Council of the City of Colwood acknowledge that council alone is wholly responsible for any decisions made by the council, and that the Chief Administration Officer is responsible to implement the decisions of council. Council support for staff that Colwood is fully supportive of the actions taken by staff on the road right away in front of 3546 Charnley Place, and that council hold our CAO in very high regard and regrets any negative impact public statements may have had on our CAO, Ian Howitt. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Thank you. All those in favor?